Hey guys, Merps here, and today I wanted to talk about the warrior problem. If you've been playing the arena, listening to the Lightforge podcast, or just hanging out in the forums, reading subreddits, you know that a lot of people are complaining about warriors, right? They're saying it's oppressive, it's unfun. So let's talk about arena warriors today. I want this video to cover 4 important questions. Number 1, why is warrior so strong? Number 2, why does warrior feel so oppressive? And this is different from the first question. Number 3, is warrior an actual problem in the arena? And if warrior is an actual problem, what should be done about it? So let's begin by talking about why is warrior so strong, right? Well, they have really good cards. Duh. I don't think we need to talk that much about how Super Collider, Warpath, Execute, etc. are really, really good cards. That's the obvious thing. Number 2, Blizzard is favoring the class right now through offering rates and bucketing. You guys probably know this as well, right? Warriors get offered a lot of good cards, and the bucketing is also advantageous because they don't have to make a lot of tough choices in that Warpath is in a different bucket than Execute, right? And that's in a different bucket than Super Collider, etc. So the bucketing works out in their favor in many ways. They have very flexible, high-quality initiative and removals, right? So let's look at HS Replay. The most common cards for warriors. Most common is Dragon Roar, but after that, they have a lot of initiative. Warpath, Devastate, Execute, etc., etc. These weapons, right? Soul Rays, Super Collider. And more importantly, they have cards that cover the weaknesses of their other cards. Warriors have very few weaknesses. Let's go back to this handy dandy list from HS Replay. Warpath is really good at AoE, but it can't remove single target. But hey, Execute can, right? Warpath and Execute, 2 of the most common cards, cover for each other. Soul Rays and Super Collider are really good weapons, right? These are value generators, but they take away your health. But oh look, Amani Warbear, Direhorn, and Tarlord cover up for that. And well, some of these cards are a little bit small, right? Like Execute is not a really big card. It's like a 1-for-1. So how do warriors get their value? Oh look, Omega Assembly and Dragon Roar. So they have just really good synergies among all of their cards, and they cover for each other's weaknesses. But a strong class doesn't necessarily mean an oppressive class. Right now, warriors are strong, but they feel oppressive, right? And you can tell by how much complaints we get about the class. So what's the difference here? Well, we can look at a class that was, in previous metas, very strong, but never felt oppressive. A few years ago, Rogue was consistently either at the top or near the top of the meta. It's still very close to the top right now, but there was a time in which Rogue was just the #1 class, right? And why did no one complain about Rogue, but people complain so heavily about Warriors now? And it goes to how you beat Warriors, right? It's like the way you beat Warriors right now is what makes them feel so oppressive. So let's break it down. You could beat Warriors with a control deck, a mid-range deck, or an aggro deck. They're all viable. But when you look at what is needed for these 3, that's when the problem really comes out. So how do you beat Warriors as another control deck, right? Because Warriors right now play a control style. They grind you out, they get their value from Dragon Roar, Omega Assembly, they wipe your board with Warpath, and they win like that, right? And they put like big fat taunts in the way. If you are playing as another warrior, or if you want to play another control class like Priest, a large proportion of what determines that game is going to be who drafts better cards, right? So I think the best example right now is if you are a warrior and you are facing another warrior, whichever warrior has 2 Dragon Roars, you know, when you're playing this control style, is immediately ahead. That's just, you can certainly play better. I'm not saying that the person who has the better deck always wins, right? That's never the case. But if you are playing this like super grindy attrition style, better cards matter a lot. Well, what if you want to beat warriors by playing mid-range or aggro? Mid-range is tougher than ever these days. You have to really know how to draft, and you have to really know how to leverage your advantage in the early and mid game in order to close out the game, right? You can't go into turn 15 or turn 16 as a mid-range deck against warriors. You're going to lose. But you really cannot make mistakes by playing mid-range. And that's the problem with mid-range, right? It's really hard to draft these days, and it's hard to play. Same thing with aggro. You have to draft, if you guys have seen my aggro hunter draft guide, you have to draft in a way that feels so counterintuitive. It feels so unsafe sometimes, right? Going all in. And once again, mistakes are super punishing. Mistakes in the draft and mistakes in your play as well. So, is Warrior actually a problem in the arena? The numbers will say not really, right? The numbers don't point to the same problem that a lot of people are complaining about. Because right now, the win rate of Warriors is 53%, with Hunters right on their tail. And historically, we've seen a lot of other classes have much higher win rates. So what's the issue here, right? Why are we getting so many complaints? Well, the actual problem for Warriors these days, right? It's not because they have Super Collider. It's not because they have Dragon Roar. I think what we need to really focus on is the same problem we've seen before. Warriors have become the noob cannon build, archetype, or class. And we've seen this with Dragon Priest, Firelands Portal Mage, and Muster/Keeper of Oldemon Paladin as well. So we're in the same state that we're in when these sort of decks reigned supreme in the arena. And these all have the same attributes. Number one, a predetermined cookie cutter draft and playstyle. This is really, really good. You know, this is one of the fundamentals of the noob cannon build, because one of the skills in the arena is going into the draft and saying, I have to be flexible. I have to see where the draft takes me. But with Warrior these days, and for all of these kind of archetypes throughout the history of the arena, you can go into a draft, you can pick the class, you know, you can pick the mage, and you can say, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to get here, right? And I'm going to build towards that. And that takes away a lot of the skill set that people have sort of associated with the arena. And it makes the class very powerful, right? Number two, a lot of flexibility and initiative. You know, these tend to be classes that have a lot of options, right? Just a lot of good cards and a lot of cards that put their opponents in a tight spot. And lastly, this is really important, it's the ability to cover up mistakes, right? Where, if you remember playing against Dragon Priest, well, what happens if they make a mistake? Well, they just clean it up, right? They clean it up with a Potion Madness, Dragonfire Potion, or Shadow Madness. If you make a mistake, or if the Firelands Portal Mage makes a mistake, well, they just cast all of their spells, right? Flame Strike, Firelands Portal, etc. With Keeper of Oldemon, if they made bad trades, or even if you're ahead and you keep on building, they always can come back with a Keeper of Oldemon, right? Equality Consecrate, etc. So whenever we see the noob cannon build, one of the problems is always, you know, you can predetermine what you're going to get, and they're really powerful, and they are resistant to mistakes, right? So this is why we call it the noob cannon build, which is the real problem. Warrior right now is too punishing and too unfun for the vast majority of players. I'm not saying that if you're an infinite player, Warrior is not a problem. I still find Warriors unfun to play, but it's a problem that not only have we seen throughout the history of Hearthstone Arena, the noob cannon problem is a problem that we see in other games as well. And please excuse my examples, I am not a pro in Overwatch or Smash Ultimate, but in Overwatch, we saw this problem some metas ago with Junkrat, where Junkrat was really, really good. His spam and his mines were very noob friendly. So what you saw in like Silver and Gold League was a lot of Junkrat spam. And the problem with Junkrat spam is that in order to beat a Junkrat with another character, right, with some other character, the counter usually required a lot higher skill than the player playing the Junkrat and just kind of spamming and throwing the mines. And that's kind of what we see with King K. Rool in Smash Ultimate right now as well, where the problem with King K. Rool is that, you know, you don't see the top players and top streamers really complaining about him, but in the lower tiers for Smash Ultimate, King K. Rool just feels kind of oppressive because he can just projectile spam you, and yes, there are punishes for doing that, but it's really hard playing as another character to properly punish that, and it feels as though, you know, like someone can pick up King K. Rool, and it requires a lot higher skill in order to beat the K. Rool, right? So with going back to Warriors in the arena right now, the real problem is that the counters to arena Warriors exist, but they're either heavily based on RNG, which is the control v control matchup, right? Or they require a much higher skill set by playing mid-range or aggro. And it's just because these archetypes are getting just harder and harder to draft by default, right? We don't have as much tools for these two as we used to. You can still be very successful, and I would point to my results with Aggro Hunter and Adapta's results with mid-range everything. He's been killing it this month with mid-range decks in terms of Rogue, in terms of Mage. You can just look at the 12-win videos on this channel. But these do require a higher skill set, and they're much more punishing when you do make a mistake. So do I think that there's a problem? Yeah, I do. 53% win rate is not that problematic, but I do believe for something like this that we're essentially chasing people away from the arena with something like this, right? And when a class just feels this bad to play against, a class, not like a certain card, right? Like a whole entire class, there are definitely levers that we can pull to make things better. So what do I think Blizzard should do? Number one, we should adjust the offering rates. That's simple enough. Warriors are getting offered a lot of good cards. Let's tone that down a bit. Number two, we should re-bucket to make sure Warriors can't have it all. Because right now, if you look at the bucketing system, from the first bucket to the third bucket, it's proportioned in a way in which, you know, Warpath isn't going up against Super Collider or Soul Thrays, right? Dragon Roar is not going up against those cards as well. So they, right now, can have it all. And this is what happens with the bucketing system, where yeah, you're trying to make tough choices, but sometimes you actually help out a class a lot by making sure cards never go together. So Warriors don't have to make these choices. And whenever a Dragon Roar comes up, they always can pick the Dragon Roar, right? Like the Dragon Roar isn't going up against the Soul Thrays. So right now, one of the problems is Warriors can have it all. Let's make some tough choices, right? Like, let's make sure that they actually have some tough choices, and they can't just make these super synergistic decks. In the future, Blizzard can definitely act faster, right, with these changes. And I am encouraged because with the new patch in December, it seems like that's what they're doing. But the toughest thing for them to do, but I think it is necessary if you want to make Arena feel more like Arena, is they have to print more boring cards. And look, I'm not a developer, I don't know what's behind the scenes, and I know that they have to sell expansions, and boring cards, like vanilla cards, don't go along with it. But this is why mid-range is so tough to play nowadays, or it's tougher than it used to be. Because if you look at what these expansions are doing, they're printing cards not like Yetis and Pit Fighters, but they're printing conditional cards. And even like, you know, the conditional cards, strange removals, oddly statted minions, right? Like they're favoring polarized minions more. Like instead of just printing a 4/4, they like 2 6s, right? Or they'll make a 1/6 or a 5/2 with an ability, something like that. in which it makes the board a lot more interesting and swingy, but it makes mid-range definitely a lot tougher to play. So that's what I'm hoping for. And the reason I made this video was because I think we should reframe the issue. I think we should think about it in this way. It's not just about Dragon Roar. It's not just about Super Collider. When we think about the Warrior problem, we should think about, okay, this is a problem that's plagued not just Hearthstone Arena, but all games, right? It's the noob cannon problem. Anyways, that's my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think. I'm hoping we can have a good discussion about this. Hope you guys have a good year. See you around.